Hello, everybody, and welcome to Between Two Beths. I am Beth M, and hello, my friend and colleague Beth Y. How are you today, Beth?
I am great. How about yourself?
Good. I am really well, thank you as well. So, welcome to our first episode in May of Between Two Beths called Living a Life That Didn't Follow the Script. And you're probably thinking that could be any number of things, and it could be, but first we'll introduce ourselves and then we'll tell you more about what we're going to talk about. I am Beth M. I am a holistic nutrition and health coach and turned champion for the midlife caregiver. I love to help women take care of themselves during this time, the season that they're in of caregiving, no matter who they're caregiving for, helping them understand the importance of taking care of themselves and helping them find ways that fit their own life to do so. Because I understand after 2 seasons of caregiving, I understand that your regular self care, regular things don't always fit into the caregiver's life. So that's what I do, and I do some coaching as well. So happy to chat with anybody or to help anybody out. You can reach out to either of us, and we'll tell you how at the end of the episode. But I'm going to turn it over to Beth Y to introduce herself, and then we'll get into our topic for today.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are. I am Beth Y. I am a certified life coach and transition specialist. I work with people going through major life changes, but I specialize in working with people that are widowed and are moving from just existing to fully living again. I myself have am a widow and have gone down that path. Fortunately, I am now decide where I'm living fully again, but it's an incremental process and it's not an easy process. I will be clear in saying that I don't do grief counseling, that's therapy. Coaching is about moving forward and charting your path. And so that's the space I play in. I kind of liken it to when you lift your head out of the sand and the fog starts to clear, and you then say, now what? How do I live the rest of my life?
Yeah.
Now, Beth M is a champion for the caregiver. We were just chatting before we turned the cameras on. I echo what she says. I'm also a part-time caregiver. I have a 91-year-old mother, and I was telling her just before we started how exhausting. We've had a lot of change recently in our lives, and
Yes.
so taking care of yourself and what that does is equally as important as taking care of the person in your charge. I also offer individual coaching sessions. I offer group coaching sessions. And as Beth said, we'll let you know how to get a hold of us if you want to work with either one of us or both of us. We're happy to accommodate you any way we can. So I'll turn it back over to Beth.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Beth. And yes, it is exhausting, and I honor you and appreciate you for being here and all of your hard work, as well as then the work you do for people who have lost and want to start living again. So that's awesome. The way I want to introduce today's topic, living a life that didn't follow the script, is to say that it might be an uncomfortable conversation, even for Beth and I at times. But we felt it needed to be shared for those who have lost mothers or who are taking care of a mother whose health is declining. Mother's Day is this weekend, and it can be a difficult season for you, for us. I remember it. I've lost my mom, and it can still be challenging, but we want to attempt to talk about a different type of thing here on Mother's Day. And that is not being a mother. For those women who haven't become a mother and are midlife or later in life, like both Beth and I are, and are going to be having a baby, that's kind of the unscripted life that we both are living and have lived. And I just wanted to quickly start with Steve's and my story, a why we didn't have a child. I had endometriosis, was diagnosed at 28 years old. 14 years later, I got married, so I did have a lot of time to get healthier, but unfortunately, I wasn't involved in the health industry at that time, and I chose a lot of medical ways of doing things. And I won't share all of them with you here, but suffice it to say, it wasn't the best way to go about things now that I know. But at 42, when we decided to marry, it was decided by doctors and us that it wasn't the best thing for my health to have a baby. As well as our age played into it. Steve was a few years older than me. So we did decide not to have children. And that was a devastating decision for me because it was a long held desire of mine to have a baby. And it just didn't work out that way. So I wanted to share that up front because there are a lot of assumptions made as well by others for people who don't have children. And that is why we chose not to have a baby. And I wanted to talk a little about assumptions, Beth, first. Assumptions that maybe there was a loss. Maybe you didn't want to be a mom. You didn't want to sacrifice your time. You were selfish. Maybe, too, people assume that when you don't have children, you have more time, more available time, and live a less fulfilling life than mothers with children. And that was one of the things I thought maybe we could talk about first because so often those things aren't spoken, but they're felt by us as women who don't have children. And I just wondered what you thought about those assumptions or how it has felt for you, people assuming in your life.
Yeah. Well, yes, obviously I don't have children, as Beth said. For me, my circumstances were a little bit different. I was actually born with a genetic defect. And so it was something that was common in firstborn sons. Well, obviously I didn't fit the profile. Um, and so it was corrected. But then as I grew older, I had these different health issues kind of pop up that um, weren't common. And nobody could really tell me why. And so for me, I was very concerned, and nobody could say yes or no when I asked the question. Um, can this manifest in other ways if I were to have a child? Meaning, could the child be, and I know it's a personal decision, but I made the choice, my husband and I made the choice to not have children because of it. But we weren't sure how it could manifest, and
See.
there were no clear answers. So when it comes to assumptions, yeah, um, I absolutely agree with you. There are a lot of assumptions out there about, being a mother and not being a mother. And I like to call it the mother within, is how I kind of
Mm.
categorize it. And so, there are those that didn't have children, some by choice,
Yeah.
some because of medical reasons. There are also those that, um, mothers that maybe gave their babies up for
Mm.
adoption.
Sure.
And then, those that are in the foster system and things like that. But there's a lot of assumptions out there about how, and I think you said about, maybe we aren't as fulfilled. Um, I don't really have an answer for that because I know my life is fulfilled. I don't know any differently. So I have nothing to compare it to. Um, I have I stopped counting nieces and nephews once the count got to 40. So I have no idea. I haven't counted, I can't keep track of them all. And, I have a godson that I adore, is a big part of my life. And so just because you don't have children, it doesn't mean you're not fulfilled. All right. And I have a good friend of mine, her daughter. I am her unofficial Aunt Beth.
Mm.
I adore her. And she is graduating college in 2 weeks. I will be there cheering her on. So we make our families, right?
Yeah.
And that's how, there's a family you're born with, and then there's the family you choose.
Choose.
And by your friends are equally as important in your family unit at times.
Hmm.
And so, the assumption that, you know, one, I'm not a fan of assumptions.
Yeah.
Okay, I will tell you that right now. In coaching, we have something called Gales. All right, you may have heard me talk about this before. So there's the gremlins, right? Um, and that's a negative self-talk. You tell yourself, I'm not good enough, fear of, whatever, whatever, whatever. So A stands for assumptions.
Ah, yes.
Okay. Um, and then you have limiting beliefs. And then you have interpretations. I did those backwards. Gremlins, assumptions, interpretations, and limiting beliefs, right? So limiting belief is something you believe,
Yeah.
right? Probably been told. An interpretation is there's blanks in the story, and so you're filling in the blanks.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of overlap between assumptions and interpretations,
Mm.
right? So when people assume things, they're filling in the blanks, and that's not necessarily fair,
No.
um, and can be a little judgmental.
Yeah.
But um, to me, I think it's important not fill in those blanks to find out the true story. Just because you don't have children doesn't mean that you're not a caring and nurturing person.
Yes.
It just didn't happen for you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I love that, Gales. And you're right. Filling in the blanks can be very similar to assumptions. So my thought about more on assumptions would be that if you know of someone who doesn't, and they're your friend and doesn't have children, ask them if you really want to know, or just don't always assume the worst. Don't always just
Yeah,
assume that you know their story, because I think that's part of what I wanted to say today is that when you don't know someone's story, you don't know their story. Their story is their business until they share it. So when we just think we know someone else because of what they look like, because of what their family looks like, or where they live, or whatever, then we're not doing them justice, and we're not really being a friend in that way, because we don't know what is going on behind. It's we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, right? That's something that people talk about a lot, where families and fighting or things like that are concerned. And we're not talking about that, but unless I would share my story, nobody knows why I don't have children. And rarely people ask. And I do understand that that can be uncomfortable, especially around Mother's Day and things. But I think around Mother's Day is when we need to remember people who look differently than the story, than that script. We're talking about living this different script, right? You're going to see out at restaurants and churches and malls and things like that. You're going to see mothers and daughters and families and things like that. Well, how about those ladies that don't have children? What will they look like? And how would it be if someone offered a kind word to them as opposed to just a blind eye? I have always felt that I didn't like, there's this celebration of this group that I don't belong to as a woman on Mother's Day. And it's painful. It still can bring me to tears on Mother's Day, being around others that have children, have, my age would be grown-up children and grandchildren, or whatever. And yes, always remembering the loss of my mom and the time I had to spend with her. But that that not feeling a part of this group, and I don't always have to belong. I'm not saying that. It's just that it, Mother's Day has many stories to it, and we only
yeah.
allow for that one. And so what's your thoughts on that, Beth?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I feel too, we're a little bit, we usually talk about caregiving and widowhood and stuff. So
Yes.
we're a little outside the box today, but it's a very
Yes, we are.
important topic. Um, but I think it's important to, you shared your story and we talked about assumptions. Um, and I think for me, I am at a point in my life where I like to say I'm coming into my own. And it's taken me my entire life to get there where I'm no longer ashamed to say certain things, certain truths.
Yeah.
And that's what they are. But I think for many people, guilt has kind of kept some of those truths down. And we bury them deep within ourselves. So when we share some of these things, and these are, you know, in one of our episodes, we talked about vulnerability.
Yeah.
Vulnerability. I can say that fast, right? Um,
Yeah.
so emotional vulnerability is one of the most deep forms of vulnerability. And there's all kinds of vulnerability, but when you share something that is close to your heart and really touches your soul, um, that's bearing yourself to others. And you know, by releasing that shame, that those assumptions that have been placed on you, that make you feel maybe a little less than at times,
Yeah.
um, by releasing that and owning it and then speaking about it is cathartic. It's healing.
Yes. Absolutely.
And when people hear that, acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Acknowledge that person is a whole person.
Yeah.
People
Absolutely.
come in all different shapes and sizes. Um, and for Beth, who
Stories.
wanted desperately to be a mother
Mhm.
and made the decision, me, it's a little bit different because I've known, I've known about the genetic defect almost my entire life.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about, how this could affect me in adult life and motherhood when I was fairly young. And then, once I got married, my husband, I had the conversation, but acknowledge that, this can be painful. Um, on the day, Mother's Day itself, um, if you're in that position, I mean, give yourself permission to step back or redefine the day if you should.
Mhm.
My mother is still alive. I'm going to be spending it with her and my sisters. But Mother's Day, we've talked about triggers before, right? Um, Mother's Day can be a trigger. It can be incredibly painful.
Yeah.
Um, in Beth's case, where she desperately wanted to be a mother, and her mother is no longer living.
Mhm.
So invite empathy.
Yeah.
You know, allow people to grieve in a way.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's a form of grief. Maybe not deep grief anymore, but it's a loss
Absolutely.
nonetheless.
Absolutely.
So and just be that person that recognizes that it is painful for some people
Yeah.
and offer encouragement.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Well, that's that's so true. And just allowing everyone to have their own story and not assuming that it's the same, it's the one that everyone is celebrating. Um, the one thing I did want to say is bringing it back to caregiving and widowhood. The fact is that not having children can actually add a different layer of emotional and physical responsibility or complexity to our lives. Um, where caregiving is concerned, it has to do with a lack of and widowhood in this case, a lack of a built-in support system, possibly lack of people maybe to even talk to and vent or share responsibilities or logistics and loads like that, things that you have to do like that, it makes caregiving and possibly widowhood as well more isolating, more constant, more consuming. But what it also brings up is that solo ager concept. So it brings up the thought of your own mortality, your own health and wellness, and not having children. Who is going to take care of me and us? So it really adds something to the caregiving and the widowhood season. And I wanted to touch on that because that does bring it right back to the people that we talk to. And there may be fewer that don't have children than that do, but there probably are people out there we're talking to that know someone like us, right? So that's kind of how I wanted to end. I'm going to throw it back to you, Beth, to end it. I will say that you can get in touch with me on my website at bethmeekcoach.com if you'd like to work with me at all. And I'm going to throw it back to Beth to give it a final thought and how you might work with her if you're interested.
Yeah, well, I will say where it intersects with widowhood, um, depending the age of when you were widowed.
Yes, for
Okay.
sure.
It could also, not only could it be, is it a loss of a partner, but it could also be a loss of a dream. So maybe you were planning on having children and you had not yet gotten there. And
Yes.
so, that can be a very hard concept to swallow because
Yeah.
you lost your partner and then you're now, at a point where the reality may not happen because of timing.
Yeah.
Um, and that's heartbreaking
Yes.
on many levels. But going back to Beth, yeah, you know, um, when you are childless and you're aging, you have to start thinking about those things that, who is going to be taking care of me? So I
Yeah.
said, I'm a part-time caregiver. Um, and so those are real thoughts I have.
Yeah.
So, um, and it's not easy to confront either. That's a hard reality.
Yeah, that's right.
But I'm going to wrap it up. We've talked on this. So if you want to be able to work with me, I am Beth at Beyond Coaching by Beth.com. You can reach me at Beth Beyond Coaching by Beth.com. That's my email address. Um, and as I say before and again, we do not script these conversations. We usually pick a topic and then we have our own notes that we might refer to. We want these to be collaborative and conversational. And we do not advertise. That's the other thing. So neither one of us really advertises. Maybe social media, and we do these videos. So we welcome if the opportunity for you to share our conversations and to follow us on our social media sites. And with that, I'll sign off. Happy Mother's Day.
Yes. Happy Mother's Day. Bye, Beth.
Bye.